The pleasure to have here Professor Banakas from the School of Law, University of East Anglia. And Professor Banakas is going to speak about the public health and individual rights, a moral perspective. Thank you a lot, Professor.
Okay, well, thanks very much, and buonasera from England. Um, we are all in the same boat these days. We are all locked up at home and thinking about how lucky we were so far, going around and visiting other countries and seeing our friends and having nice conferences and so on. Let's hope that we shall find a way out of this uh, pandemic. I wanted to just say a few words. First of all, I want to thank Carlo Piglia and his team in Cagliari for setting up this wonderful meeting. That is certainly a great opportunity for us to see each other, talk to each other, and take some courage from this lockdown that we are all in. And it's a wonderful meeting, very well organized. Thank you very much, Carlo. And the few words I want to say are about some very fundamental issues that actually are behind whatever is happening these days everywhere in the world, where we have huge conflicts of values and um, where in this very urgent climate in which there's not even time to think, you just have to take care of problems, big practical problems, huge potential issues, and so on. We lose sight sometimes of these very important fundamental issues. And they all, of course, are about how one faces this threat. And at the end of the day, there are two protagonists here. There are the scientists and the lawyers. And the lawyers are the ones that can turn what in normal circumstances will be a very unlawful behavior that violates human rights into a lawful behavior by the authorities that is necessary in the general interest in the pursuit of the common good. So, looking at the way in which the world lives today, in lockdown with people being restricted in their freedom of movement and all other kinds of freedoms, um, uh, we see that the paramount consideration is public health, is the common interest, although that sometimes takes a form of rather a very indirect aim. The first direct aim is in almost every country to protect the medical services, to protect the state health centers and hospitals from being overburdened by sick people. And in some sort of way, the means has become an end because these medical institutions should actually be about serving the people, or the people should not be serving the institutions, so to speak. So we should not get sick because it's bad for us, not because it's bad for the hospitals. But anyway, obviously, public health is one issue, and also the life itself, preservation of life, sanctity of life is another issue. So if there is a moral discourse, very basic, elementary moral discourse behind what is happening to us these days, everywhere in the world, in every country in the world, then we have this, if you like, there's always a conflict, of course, in any moral discourse between values. And we have here a very classic conflict between the value of sanctity of life and the value of people being ends in themselves and not being means to an end. So all these measures that are actually measures that are not um, always directly sanctioned by the constitutions of different countries. The authorities take quite a few liberties with constitutional guarantees, and of course they perhaps have a certain justification for that, that the situation needs controlling, and we don't have time for too much debate. But at least for a few minutes, which could reflect on this basic conflict that we have. In other words, that we pursue the public health, we pursue the need to protect the health of the community by sometimes using members of the community themselves as a means to an end. So that, for example, we tell people that they should not use the medical services unless they are clearly they have symptoms, and even then they should wait until things get a bit really bad before they actually try to go to a hospital. And also, we have another idea that those that belong to the very vulnerable categories, elderly people or people with serious medical conditions, should actually lock themselves up altogether, shouldn't go out at all, because not so much, of course, also for protecting themselves, but also for protecting the system, for protecting the state health system that is needed to actually take care of everybody. And perhaps I'm a bit cynical here, but that needs also to take care of all of those others that actually, let's say, have better chances of surviving after the proper medical treatment. So uh, there is this problem that you you have to pursue the general interests of the community, public health in general, but at the same time, you are not um, always protecting individual rights of individuals, especially individuals that actually could belong to one of the two, say, extreme categories, those that actually are very little likely and then not very likely at all to catch the virus because they're very young and so on, who nevertheless have to be locked up, but also those of us that are not so young and that are seen as a threat to the medical system because of our vulnerabilities and because uh, we could actually overwhelm the system. Um, so these two extreme, let's say, not extreme so much at each end of the spectrum, these two groups at each end of the spectrum are, in a way, I'm not saying that this is actually entirely the case, but in a way are used as a means to an end. That is to say, we have to behave like we behave. We have to we have to restrict our freedoms and so on in order to allow for the existing medical facilities to cope with the rest of us. So, what is the answer? Well, not there's not much one can do at this moment where we are in most countries, especially in some Western countries, we're absolutely at the peak of the pandemic. So we don't have the luxury really to be very detailed about the way in which we think about the rights of people. But in the longer run, and there will be a long run, as the scientists say, this is not going to end tomorrow. We should factor in the way in which we try to deal with this uh, crisis. We should factor in individual rights and the protection of individuals, and perhaps elevating individuals a little bit more to the status of ends in themselves rather than a means to an end. And well, whether lawyers should actually have some responsibility in this respect, well, I'm quite sure that lawyers do have a responsibility. And even if in a country like the United Kingdom, where we don't have, as everybody knows, a written constitution, we still have a Human Rights Act and so on. And the lawyers should actually get involved, very much so, in planning the immediate future of this emergency. And in this planning, we should not forget that there is only so much that we can sacrifice rights. And after all, sanctity of life cannot be at all costs. Uh, perhaps an easy way to protect the public is to adopt the measures that legend says ancient Sparta adopted with the old and the infirm. They simply threw them off the cliff, and that was much beneficial to the majority of healthy and strong younger people. But we, of course, will not even contemplate reaching that point. But we should be a bit careful in the way in which there is a latent kind of moral argument that seems to motivate some of the ways in which authorities approach the issue of social distancing and lockdown in most Western countries. Well, I think that I spent the time that was allocated, and thank you all very much for your attention. Please keep safe and well, and let's hope, let's pray that soon we shall be able to meet again and enjoy each other's company. Thank you very much.
Grazie al professor Banakas.